Hello everyone, Happy New Year and welcome to Options with Doug. Streaming live on Monday and Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Bookmap Discord and the Bookmap YouTube channel. Before I get started, I need to go through the disclosures. General disclosure, all Bookmap limited materials, information, and presentations are for educational purposes only and should not be considered specific investment advice nor recommendations. Risk disclosure, trading futures, equities, and options involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Here's my contact information. The best way to get in touch with me is through Discord. My name on Discord is Doug P. Also in Bookmap Discord, there's an Options-Doug chat channel. You can post questions, comments, and content related to the topics of my presentation and the topics of the channel that I'll go through in just a moment. I'm also on X. My name there is @Pless. Here are the key tenets to my approach to trading. I believe that options trades and market maker hedging activity are key drivers of price in many stocks and futures. That certainly applies to the large cap tech stocks like the Magnificent Seven stocks, as well as the equity index futures like the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. And for the S&P 500, SPX is the underlying index, SPY is the ETF version of that index, and the ES futures contract is a derivative of SPX. And when traders buy and sell puts and calls in SPX and SPY, market makers take the opposite side of the trades and they hedge their adult exposure with ES futures. For the NASDAQ 100, NDX is the underlying index. QQQ is the much more liquid ETF version of that index, and the NQ futures contract is a derivative of NDX. And just like the S&P 500, when traders buy and sell puts and calls in NDX and QQQ, market makers take the opposite side of the trades and they hedge their adult exposure with NQ futures. The focus of my presentation today and the focus of the Options-Doug chat channel is options order flow, the impact of options markets on stocks and futures, and the influence of market maker hedging flow on price action. I have a two-step process for trading, and the first is planning, and I use positional analysis. I look at how traders and market makers are positioned in the options market and how those positions change from day to day to develop a thesis regarding expected trading range and volatility for the day, as well as a directional bias. And the second step in my process is execution. I look at real-time order flow in Bookmap and real-time market maker hedging flow in Spotgamma Hero to confirm my thesis and for setups. And when I talk about setups today, I will be focusing on an underlying asset. Setups in that asset can be taken with futures contracts, shares of stock, or options, depending on the asset as well as the way you like to trade. Questions and comments are welcome, and I will be watching both the Options-Doug chat channel as well as the chat and YouTube for your questions and comments. Please feel free to post. I'll do my best to answer your questions. Here's my agenda for today, Monday, January 5th. First of all, I want to go over news items, economic data, and events for today as well as the rest of the week. Then I'll go through my positional analysis. Then I'll review some setups earlier today. Then I'll get to live market. And when I get to live market, if anyone has any stocks they want me to take a look at, please let me know and I'll be glad to do that. All right, let's get started with news items. So back to a full week of trading now. Holidays are over. And there's some data coming out this week. For today, the ISM, what we're looking at here is the Spotgamma dashboard, home screen dashboard home screen, showing the events calendar. So this shows most of the data for this week. We'll need to scroll down to see more. So today, the ISM manufacturing PMI data came out at 10 a.m. We'll take a look at the S&P 500 in just a minute to see if there was any reaction to that. But that data came in less than expected, less than the previous number, and also less than 50, indicating contraction. Also, CES kicks off today, Consumer Electronics Show, and Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, will be giving the keynote address. I believe that's at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't quote me on that, but that's my understanding. And I believe sometime this week, Lisa Su, CEO of AMD, will be speaking as well. All right, on Tuesday, and I'm not certain about this, S&P Services PMI comes out at 9:45 a.m. Eastern Time, and I actually do not see it on the schedule. So moving on to Wednesday, ADP employment private payrolls data comes out at 8:15 a.m. Eastern Time. And then at 10 a.m., the ISM Services PMI data comes out, as well as the JOLTS data. And then on Thursday, jobless claims, and then the big data release of the week is the job report at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That is for December. That was delayed a week. So that's the December jobs report will come out on Friday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. I believe there is some housing data coming out as well. And then at 10 a.m., Michigan consumer sentiment. All right, so that wraps up this week for economic data and events. Big release of the week, again, is the jobs report, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Friday. All right, let's move on to positional analysis. Let's take a look at the S&P 500. And I'm showing data that began overnight here right around 6 a.m. Showing chop around the SPX, 68.75 volatility trigger, and then right around 8:30 price broke above that level. Also the SPY 685 large gamma 2 level. And then ES traded above the upper daily expected move. A bit of chop between the open 9:30 and 10 a.m. Looks like there was potentially some reaction to the ISM data at 10 a.m. as price moved firmly above the upper daily expected move, and looked like around that level had acted as support before, and then price broke above the 6,900 level. That's a very key level. 6,900 noted as a resistance. In the Spotgamma AM Founders Note, price did break above that. It took several tries. All right, so those are the levels in play. And we'll take a look at the Spotgamma Trace Gamma Heat Map in just a couple minutes to see more current levels in play based on Gamma. All right, so those are the levels in play. So before we take a closer look at this chart, let's step back. Let's take a look at our higher time frame. I'm going to go to SPX, the underlying index for the S&P 500. This is a 1 year, 1 day chart and Thinkorswim. So the April rally started to slow down a bit on October 10th. Tariff tantrum, NVIDIA earnings report, another pullback, not as deep, but SPX has continued to make new highs. All right, so let's take a closer look. Let's look at a 30-day 1 hour chart. So here's the latest deep pullback, 1120. NVIDIA reaction to NVIDIA earnings reports, and then a strong rally after that, and then consolidation into a range of about 6,800 to 6,900. And then a final shakeout, and then a rally to new highs, right around 69.45. And most recently, support level, right around 69.24.25. And then nice gap up today. All right, let's take a look at some of the levels on this chart. And I'm going to start with the expected moves. Dashed purple lines showing the lower and upper weekly expected move based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX from last Friday. Those levels remain in place for the entire week. Then the dashed blue lines are showing the lower and upper daily expected move. This is also based on the closing price for SPX from last Friday. Those levels change every day. Note SPX did gap up and moved quickly above that upper daily expected move. All right, let's take a look at the levels on this chart. Let me zoom in just a bit. All right, I'm going to point out the key daily levels. First of all, the put wall is at 6,800. That's a strike with large net negative gamma. It can be expected to act as support. Next level up is the volatility trigger at 68.75. That's a level that I pointed out this morning that ES moved higher than that level. That was before the cash open, which is shown here in the dark shaded portions. So that is Spotgamma's proprietary volatility and gamma flip level. Below that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is negative. In a negative gamma environment, market makers have to trade with price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to enhance or increase volatility. Above that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is positive. In a positive gamma environment, market makers have to trade against price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to subdue or decrease volatility. And we'll take a look at, this is based on Spotgamma's older total open interest model. And we'll take a look at a view of gamma based on the newer synthetic open interest model. And it does happen to agree with the older model today. All right, then finally the call wall and absolute gamma strike remain at 7,000. So the call wall is a strike with large net positive gamma. It can be expected to act as resistance. And then the absolute gamma strike is a strike with large absolute positive and negative gamma. So that's where most of the gamma weighted open interest is concentrated. So those levels are unchanged from last Friday. So no changes in SPX levels from Friday. All right, let's wrap up our view of SPX with a 1 minute chart so we can get a little bit closer view of price action. Let me zoom in on this. All right, so this is the low that I was talking about, 68.24. That just happens to line up with this week's lower daily expected move. But the lower daily expected move was different on Friday. All right, so today, nice gap up. Again, there's the 68.75 volatility trigger that was tested before the cash open. Give me just a moment here. So zooming back out, I did highlight this level right around 6,900 as support and resistance level. Support, support. Price broke below that. That's last Wednesday, Thursday. That level acted as resistance as well. And then today, SPX gapped up above that level. And that just happens to coincide with the upper daily expected move. And that level acted as support today. And then SPX now trading above the key 6,900 level. And note, Spotgamma's line in the sand, bull bear line in the sand, it has been 68.90, remains at that level, which lines up with this level, this shaded area. All right, so according to Spotgamma now, SPX in bullish territory. All right, let's take a quick look at SPY. Then we'll get back to ES and Bookmap. SPY key levels. This is a test of the 680 put wall on Friday, acting as support. So Friday was a nice setup, a short setup from the 687 call wall down to the 680 put wall, and looks like a nice long in the afternoon, starting right around 2 p.m. And then really the rally that began on Friday afternoon continues. There's that 685 large gamma 2 level that I mentioned before, testing that level before the cash open. And then now SPY has traded up to 689. Whoops. Sorry about that. All right, so shifts in levels for SPY. The volatility trigger and absolute gamma strike both shifted lower, and the call wall shifted higher to 690. All right, so let's take a look at NASDAQ now. These are the NQ futures and Bookmap. So key levels. And by the way, for the S&P 500, there is a difference in price between ES and SPX. And today that offset is about 42 points. So ES minus SPX equal 42. So I'm showing SPX 6,900 at ES 6,942. And I do post the index relationships that I use every day on Discord. I also post the expected moves for SPX, ES, and NQ. All right, levels for NASDAQ. Before the cash open, that's the QQQ. 615 volatility trigger. NQ trading up above its upper daily expected move. Finding a resistance around the NDX 25,500 large gamma 3 level. And that is the highest spot gamma level for NDX. All right, let's take a look at the underlying index charts real quick for NASDAQ. Then we'll get back to the futures. So let's go to QQQ. All right, note for QQQ, this is showing as the volatility trigger today at 610. It was not the put wall. It was 615 on Friday. So on Friday, QQQ traded well below its put wall, found support at 610, and then rally continues. And today, levels in play, support, again around these 615 volatility trigger before the cash open. And it looks like QQQ has moved up to around the 620 level. That's a large gamma 2 level. Let's take a look at NDX. And let's zoom in on this. So NDX, again, this 25,500 level, around that level, acting as resistance. And that is the highest spot gamma level. Then on the downside, 25,400, that's a large gamma 4 level on the downside, and a large gamma 3 level on the upside. All right, back to Bookmap. All right, so those are the levels in play. Main levels, QQQ 615 volatility trigger on the downside, NDX 25,500 large gamma 3 on the upside. All right, let's wrap up our positional analysis by taking a look at gamma. Then we'll get to some setups in the live market. All right, so we'll move on to the Spotgamma trace gamma heat map. So what this is showing is market maker's gamma position. Blue shading indicates positive gamma. Remember, in positive gamma, we're looking for lower volatility and market makers to be trading against price. And then in red shading, negative gamma, we're looking for higher volatility, market makers trading with price. So red shading, negative gamma, higher volatility. Blue shading, lower volatility, and market makers trading against price. So it looks like SPX is just on the border between the two. Let's step back in time just a little bit here. So remember, SPX, ES, moving up this morning, and here were the targets right here. This area of positive gamma. And the two strikes, strikes, 69.20 and 69.25. So let's step through time. This is right around 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time. By the way, this data is updated every 10 minutes. So we'll step through in 10-minute increments and watch those 69.20 to 25 strikes. And SPX did make it up to the 69.20 strike. Now, as time has passed, that gamma is diminishing. So that's 0 DTE positions. And that was the target, 69.20 to 25 today. And it looks like the 69.20 level was achieved. So right now, that gamma has diminished substantially. And if, just looking at the picture now, it looks like if price starts to move lower, this is the hero signal right here. So if the hero signal does continue to move lower, look for potential faster movement through this negative gamma down below. That's if traders start selling futures, start buying SPX puts, SPY puts, and the hero signal would then move lower. All right, so that is the picture for today. Let's move on. Let's take a look at some setups. I'm going to start with the S&P 500, and I'm going to start by taking a look at what options traders have been doing today. So we've moved from static data, that's the Spotgamma key daily levels. Those are updated once a day based on open interest, gamma weighted open interest. Then we've taken a look at the gamma heat map based on Spotgamma's newer synthetic open interest model. That's updated every 10 minutes. And then this is the hero signal. HERO stands for Hedging Impact Real-Time Options. So it's showing data in real time, Hedging Impact Real-Time Options. This is showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the S&P 500 index components. We've already taken a look at a couple of those, SPX and SPY. This also includes ES and XSP. The purple line is the hero signal, and the white line is price for SPX. And the direction of the hero signal indicates options delta. So a rising hero signal indicates traders are taking positive delta positions in the S&P 500 index components. They are buying calls and or selling puts. We'll see in just a minute. They're mostly buying calls today, earlier today. When traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, and they have to buy ES futures to hedge their delta exposure. For these S&P 500 index components, that's what they use. And then a falling hero signal indicates traders are taking negative delta options positions. They are buying puts and or selling calls. Market makers, again, take the opposite side of the trades, and they have to hedge their delta exposure by selling ES futures. All right, I'm going to separate out puts and calls now so we can get well, let's zoom in on this, and then we'll take a look at puts and calls. So remember, there was chop for about the first 30 minutes. And then maybe it was the ISM data that came out at 10 a.m. and initiated the move higher. So the move higher was about 10 a.m. to 10:30. That was the main move higher today. Hello, Aguz. Welcome. Glad you're here. All right, so this is the total signal showing options trades for all expirations and puts and calls. So let's separate out puts and calls. I'm going to have to jump back. We'll take a look at that signal in just a minute. All right, so again, remember, chop for about the first 30 minutes. This is indicating that traders were overall buying calls during that time period and also buying a few puts. But right around 10 a.m., they started buying calls more aggressively, started selling puts, and price moved higher for about 30 minutes, 35 minutes. So that was the long setup this morning. And then if you held on, price moved a little bit higher. And now chopping, consolidating. So mainly driven by call buyers for most of the morning. And then the put sellers came in a little bit more aggressively for this next leg up right around 11:15. And then there are two peak patterns here indicating a top. All right, so let's go take a look at Bookmap. So we know price started to move higher right around 10 a.m. Actually, let's look at the S&P 500 equity signal first. And what this is showing is options trades and market maker hedging activity for all 500 stocks in the S&P 500 index. And this is showing traders aggressively buying calls in the equities, S&P 500 equities, starting from the cash open. And then again, price started to respond when the index component signals started to move higher right around 10 a.m. But traders were already aggressively buying calls, shown by the rising orange line. All right, let's go take a look at Bookmap now. And let's zoom in on this. We'll zoom in, let's say from about 9 to 12. All right, so we already know that the S&P 500 was moving higher before the cash open. And then there was about 30 minutes of chop, finding support right around the upper daily expected move, and then a launch higher potentially after the ISM data came out. But that's when the traders started buying calls and more aggressively buying calls and selling puts in the S&P 500 index components, and price moved higher, making an initial high right around 10:30, and then started to move higher up to the highs of the day. All right, let's take a look at what was going on in the subchart. You can see all the green volume dots from 9:30 to 10:30. So you can see there are a lot of aggressive buyers coming in. And then again, aggressive buyers after 10 a.m., shown by the large green volume dot. The volume dots in Bookmap show market buy minus sell. Green volume dots indicate more buyers than sellers. Magenta dots indicate more sellers than buyers. All right, so that lines up with cumulative volume delta. That's shown by the dark blue line. And it looks like large traders were buying with iceberg orders. They use to hide their size. They're buying ES contracts with iceberg orders. That's shown by the rising light blue line. And then also buy stop orders, shown by the yellow line, are rising as well. So overall, a very bullish setup with both the hero signal for the index components and the equities rising higher, as well as aggressive buyers, green volume dots. And the aggressive sellers really did not come in until just before noon. And you can see a couple of large magenta volume dots. Buyers are exhausted, sellers are coming in. Also note the dark shading in the heat map. Those are limit sell orders in the order book. Again, coming in around that positive gamma zone at 69.20 to 25. All right, so that's the current price action. Nice rally, really began right around 8:30. Break above the 68.75 volatility trigger. Top from 9:30 to 10. Aggressive buyers and options traders take the price up to right around SPY 689, and again the SPX 69.20 to 25 level. All right, so that's the SP 500. Let's take a look at NASDAQ. We'll zoom in on this a bit. So NASDAQ rallied in the morning as well, but made a much deeper pullback right before noon. Let's see what options traders are doing. So I'm going to shift to the total signal again. I'm going to go to the NASDAQ index signal. So this is showing a bullish opening drive, pretty much. So where the S&P 500 was chopping for the first half hour, NASDAQ was making a series of higher lows, broke out of this wedge right around 10 a.m. and continued up until the options traders took their foot off the gas. Let's shift to puts and calls. I'm going to shift to Mag 7, which looks just like the equities, or you could say the equities looks just like the Mag 7. All right, so initially traders were selling puts from the open, shown by the rising blue line. A few minutes later, started buying calls. NASDAQ moved higher. Put sellers took their foot off the gas. Then the call buyers took their foot off the gas. And now they have turned to call sellers and put buyers. And prices moving a bit lower. All right, so we know put sellers from the open, call buyers from about 9:45, and that was right around the low of the morning drive. Mag 7, aggressive call buyers from the open. In the stocks known as the Magnificent Seven: Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Tesla. And we'll take a look at some of those stocks, and we'll see that Tesla was a key driver today. And we'll take a look at that in just a minute. So, aggressive call buyers from the open, and then they took the foot off the gas just after 10:15, and price slowed down and then started to consolidate. All right, so let's go take a look at NASDAQ. Let's zoom in. All right, so there's the deep pullback at the open. Note, before the open, large traders were buying with iceberg orders. And then right around 9:30, aggressive sellers. You can see all the magenta volume dots here. Resistance at the QQQ 620 large gamma 2 level. Price moved lower. Well over 100 points in NQ. Found support at VWAP. Also the 25,550 level. Sellers took the foot off the gas. Then some buyers started to come in as traders were taking positive delta positions. Then again at 10 a.m., that was the last test there, and price rallied back up to that 25,500 level. Then now a much deeper pullback from the morning rally than the S&P 500. Are any questions about the indexes? So depending on how you trade, there were a lot of pullback opportunities for the move higher this morning, watching either the NASDAQ index signal or the Mag 7 signal. Deep pullbacks for long entries. Then price settled down a bit after 10 a.m. All right, so NASDAQ trying to recover. Let's take a look at ES. Then we'll take a look at some stocks. All right, so now it looks like ES is consolidating. All right, so let's take a look at some stocks. So I've got 6 stocks I want to take a look at. And again, if anyone has any other stocks they want me to take a look at, I'll be glad to do that. Then we'll get to the live market. So the first stock I'm going to take a look at 4 bullish stocks and then 2 bearish stocks today. And there's been a lot going on today with the news over the weekend about the capture of the Venezuelan president Maduro, and that has caused energy stocks, certain energy stocks, to rally today. So a lot going on. Bitcoin moving up, and Bitcoin-related stocks as well. At least they were earlier today. Also some nuclear stocks as well. All right, so a lot on the move today. I'm going to focus on the large cap tech stocks like that I follow closely. So first of all, Amazon, very bullish day. Let's see what options traders are doing. So let's go back to Hero. By the way, I'm looking at the older version of Hero here. I just find it a little bit easier to use when I'm jumping from one instrument to the next. So let's take a look at Amazon first. Amazon aggressive call buyers. Looks a lot like the Mag 7 signal. Flow alert comes in just after the cash open, get your attention. Signals significant options activity. Traders aggressively buying calls from the open, and then they take the foot off gas about 10:30. But overall net for the day, they have continued to buy calls. So no call peak or call exhaustion there, just a little bit of a slowdown in the call buying. So very bullish day in Amazon. When traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, they have to buy stock to hedge their delta exposure. All right, back to Amazon. You can see all the green volume dots. Rising cumulative volume delta. Aggressive buyers throughout the day. So it looks like the next primary target is 235. You can see the heat map shows a history of limit orders in the order book. So those are limit sell orders up above price. Those tend to attract price. So key level 235, that's pretty typical. The zeros and the fives for these larger, higher price stocks. So a very bullish day in Amazon. Again, pullback entries. A little bit cleaner price action in Amazon than the indexes today. All right, next stock. So that's one of the Mag 7 bullish setups today. Next stock, Meta. Also bullish opening drive. Staying bullish for the day. Let's see what options traders are doing. Go to Meta. Another bullish opening drive. A little bit of a pullback, giving you a very nice entry point for long at the 650 key gamma strike. Flow alert comes again just after the open, signals significant options activity. Get your attention. Traders are aggressively buying calls, and it looks like they pretty much abruptly took their foot off the gas right around 10:20. But still, they are continuing to buy calls. All right, so key level 650. Let's go take a look at Bookmap. So there's your entry point for long. The reversal above the 650 key gamma strike. Aggressive buyers start to come in. And price moves up toward the liquidity target at 665. Again, limit sell orders in the order book. Looks like those orders have been building since around 10:30. And note, cumulative volume delta took a few minutes but started to move higher, then slowed down right around noon. Oh, Goose asks, is it possible to talk about SI indicator, how to analyze with it? Yeah, when I get back to ES. It only works. So the SI indicator is stops and icebergs. It's part of the MBO bundle. It only works with CME futures. Requires MBO market by order data, which is only available for, again, CME futures. So we'll get back to ES and NQ in just a couple of minutes and take a look at that again. All right, so that's Meta. Back to Hero. Call buyers, bullish opening drive, and pretty abruptly take the foot off the gas just after 10:15, and Meta consolidates. All right, next stock. Stock of the day, Tesla. Was weak on Friday, and dip buyers taking advantage of that today. Another brief dip at the open down to the 445 hedge wall as traders were buying calls from the open. Another flow alert, also selling puts. Call buyers much more aggressive, but traders have continued to sell puts and buy calls, although it has slowed down a bit. But traders, again, continue to buy calls and sell puts. And Tesla making very nice move higher. Let's see what, let's take a look at Bookmap. And by the way, old goose, if you want to learn more about the SI indicator, I suggest going to the Bookmap Learning Center or watch some of the other webinars. There are a lot of speakers that just focus on futures. I look at futures and stocks. All right, so Tesla, bullish opening drive. Pull back entries for a long. As traders aggressively buy calls and sell puts. Rising cumulative volume delta. And now Tesla consolidating, chopping around as the traders have taken their foot off the gas, options traders. Or slowed down anyway. All right, so that's Tesla. I've got one other bullish stock. Let's see, Robinhood recovering, and maybe with the Bitcoin recovery today, or at least it was earlier. Again, a bullish opening drive. Traders buying calls from the open. Full alert. Break above the 120 key gamma strike call wall. A little bit of resistance at that level. But then after right around 10:30, 10:25, Robinhood broke above that level and continued to move higher until the call buyers took the foot off the gas. No traders were selling puts as well. But they all took their foot off the gas right around 11:30, and Robinhood is consolidating. So mainly driven by call buyers, but put sellers as well. Break above the 120 call wall, key gamma strike. So let's go take a look at Bookmap. Robinhood. Bullish opening drive, a lot of aggressive buyers. You can see all the green volume dots. Multiple pullback entries. And Robinhood back near highs of the day. All right, back to Hero. All right, so those are the full 4 bullish stocks I want to take a look at. And let's take a look at a couple of bearish stocks. So first of all, semiconductors weak today. We'll take a look at AMD. This is a bearish opening drive. Traders buying puts, shown by the following blue line. Then they start selling calls right around 950. And AMD moves lower, breaks below the 230 call wall. And now looks like maybe consolidating, a little bit of continuing to grind lower. So that's AMD. Let's take a look at Bookmap. Go to AMD. Very bearish setup. Bearish opening drive. Looks like there are some buyers coming in, shown by the cumulative volume delta that began right around 950 maybe. But not having a lot of influence on stock. Looks like the options traders continued to drive it lower. All right, so that's AMD. Kind of a strange day. Semiconductors weak, whereas semiconductor equipment stocks like Lam Research, KLAC are very strong today. So you never can tell what's going to happen. All right, so there's AMD. Looks like the target is the high liquidity limit buy orders at 220. All right, let's take a look at another bearish semiconductor stock. That's Micron. Micron has been very strong after reporting earnings and having a weak day today. Looks like it has achieved the target of 310. So Micron was already weak before the cash open, making a series of lower highs. Bearish opening print, and then a sharp drop. Some aggressive buyers came in, took Micron almost up to 320, broke back below the VWAP, shown by the light blue line there, and then on down to the 310 level. So it's from the open, so far about a 15-point drop lower for Micron. Let's see what options traders are doing. All right, back to Hero. And Micron. All right, bearish opening drive, bearish momentum. Bearish momentum is when the blue line and the orange line moving the same direction. There's that setup for a nice secondary short entry as a few call buyers came in, but they quickly started selling calls and buying puts again. So bearish opening drive. Full alert comes in just after the open. Signals, again, significant options activity. Traders selling calls, buying puts. Market makers take the opposite side of the trades, and they have to hedge the adult exposure by selling stock. All right, so we looked at 4 strong stocks and then 4 weak stocks, semiconductor stocks. All right, let's circle back. Let's take a look at the indexes now. I'm going to go back to the total signal for the S&P 500 index. that signal is turning lower. And typically this time of day, the indexes slow down quite a bit. The morning trading is almost always the best. All right, Aguz wants to take a look at the SI indicator. So let's go back to Bookmap. We'll go back to ES. So the SI indicator, there are two versions, two pieces to it. Stops and icebergs on the subchart, which is normally what I show. So I have these stops and icebergs. Icebergs, light blue, stops yellow. You can use whatever color you want. I like to show some mode. So I'm showing the overall picture of stops and icebergs. If you want to see the individual events, you can turn on the on chart. It'll take a minute for that to load. So this shows the events. So in the subchart, I'm showing the overall sum of the stops and icebergs since I opened up Bookmap somewhere between 6:30 and 7 a.m. Eastern Time. All right, so these tabs are showing icebergs and stops. So that's showing sell iceberg orders and buy stops in those two little icons there. All right, so ways to use this. Normally, the stops orders are in line and sync with price. Sometimes large traders will be in line with price. They will be buying strength, and sometimes they are buying weakness. But I also often look at iceberg orders as a leading signal. So in this case, that's not really the case. They were moving in conjunction with price. But you can see right here, right around 12 o'clock, there's a final stop run up to the highs of the day, and then a sharp stop in the stop orders right there. But traders, large traders, do continue to buy with iceberg orders. All right, so Aguz, again, if you want to find out more information, just go take a look at the Bookmap Learning Center. So let's turn that off. All right, any more questions, comments? Anyone have any stocks they want me to take a look at? All right, let's take a look. Let's go take a look at Trace now. Take a look at the gamma heat map. So still looks like the red shading now is building. The negative gamma red shading. And you can see the GEX over here on the left, GEX bars. And that is from 68.95. Remember the importance of that level. On the downside, 69.20 on the upside. So now that strike has turned from positive gamma to negative gamma, and it looks like it is centered right around 69.10. So looking for the potential for faster movement. And for that to happen, most likely the hero signal would have to turn sharply lower instead of chopping up and down right there. All right, back to hero. So the S&P 500 equity signal is still gradually, well, I would say it's pretty much flat from here. That's the equity signal. 2.2 billion at this time of day is moderate at best. It's delta notional, positive delta notional. And the same for the S&P 500 index, delta notional, 2.11 billion. That's very light. Let's take a look at something else. So right now I'm looking at the hero signal combined puts and calls for all expirations. So that's today, tomorrow, Friday, end of month, etc. And then we can turn on next expiry, which would be options that expire today for the S&P 500. So this is showing, this is kind of unusual that the 0 DTE options are only making up about 25% or so, a little bit more of the total options delta notional today. So it looks like delta notional is positive for the day. So it looks like this is a little bit of a longer term bullish signal with traders taking options positions, bullish options positions or positive delta that expire sometime after today. All right, let's turn that off. So right now, though, the hero signal does continue to chop. And the equity signal is pretty flat, as well as the S&P 500 now chopping around between SPY 688 and 689. All right, questions, comments? Let's take a look at NASDAQ. Still looking weaker to me. Let's take a look at something else. I'm going to go back to Thinkorswim and let's take a look at a heat map. See what's moving the market today. So it looks like the weakest consumer staples and utilities. Also some of the Mag 7 stocks. Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Broadcom, Micron, and then also consumer discretionary strong due to Amazon and Tesla, which make up most of that. Then leading for the day is financials. And financials, I believe, will start to report earnings next week. I believe that's correct. We'll talk about more about that. Oguz, you're welcome. Oguz wants to take a look at TLT. All right, yeah, we can do that. So I don't have TLT and Bookmap. We can go to Hero. Take a look. And by the way, let's check one other thing. Today, S&P 500 is up, and then VIX is up as well, which is pretty interesting. So something's got to give. So that can't last. Either price or VIX has to give. So VIX will have to turn negative, or S&P 500 turn lower. All right, TLT. All right, so not a lot of activity in TLT. Looks like traders are taking net negative delta options positions for the day in TLT. Looks like it is a little bit higher from the open. All right, last call, questions, stocks. Go back to the S&P 500. All right, so the index signal still making lower highs or slightly lower highs recently in the last 45 minutes. Back to Bookmap. NASDAQ still looking pretty weak. Cumulative volume delta has been gradually moving lower since a few minutes before noon. Large traders were buying with iceberg orders. They looked like they finally took their foot off the gas. And we'll wrap up with the S&P 500. Continues to chop between SPY 688 and 89. All right, everyone, remember Wednesday data coming out, ADP, ISM Services, PMI, and JOLTS data at 10 a.m. We'll talk about it on Friday. And then the big jobs report coming on Friday. All right, everyone, have a great afternoon. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.